welcome to Get Good with Storyline. I'm John Morley. I've been doing instructional design for about 2 decades now, the last 5 years of which were with Genentech using Storyline. I am now an independent consultant, so if I can help you on a project, my email address is in the chat window. Look forward to hearing from you. There we go. No one knows everything about Storyline, especially me. That's why we have this workshop, so we can talk shop and we can share what we do know. Toward that end, we are fortunate to have with us Joe Waddington. Joe, I keep thinking Paddington Bear when I look at
That happens.
Okay. Joe is runs sessions at DevLearn, and I believe he's continuing to do so. He has accumulated 20 years of experience developing e-learning for 3 different state agencies in Washington State, and he leads a community of practice, kind of what we're doing this evening, talking about Storyline and e-learning in general. Would you like to say hi, Joe?
Hi, everyone.
There's Joe to say hi. Say hi, Joe.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. That's what Joe looks like. Joe's email is also in there in the chat window. Tonight we're going to be talking about templates. I've been skeptical about templates because the templates I've seen from Microsoft and the early website templates were a little bit restrictive, weren't all that imaginative, looked as if they were put together by coders who didn't have any graphic design experience. Going on to the Articulate website, the templates there looked as if they are, well, in fact, they are developed by actual instructional designers who have a little bit of graphic design flair. And in fact, some of the IDs are employees of Articulate. However, some of the templates that I've seen there are tab sets. So allow me to vent just a little bit here. If a project is being used as reference material where the expectation is to go in, get information, and then get out, that is exactly what tab sets are for. Perfect use, because you're not expecting the user to see every single slide. However, if this is a training, a WBT, the expectation is for the learner to see every slide, and the learner expects to just keep clicking next to get through the entire course. So when they see a tab set there, this is a change in navigation. Change is stressful. So they're wondering, why is there change? What's going on here? Is this different? Is this more important information? Is this less important information? Is this optional? If this was optional information, this is exactly how it would be presented. What happens if I don't click it? Can I go over it? What happens if I just click next? Does this take me back to what is on the tabs, or does this take me forward? Can I come back and see it later? Is it going to be on the quiz? What happens if I click it out of order? Does order make any difference? Can I skip over some of them and not the other ones? What does the previous button do now? Does it take me back through the tabs, or does it take me back to this screen? These aren't insurmountable questions, and learners, of course, get through these. But why burden learners with this kind of cognitive load? I know that the rationale for tab sets is to improve interactivity, improve engagement, in short, make the lesson less boring. That leads me to ask, who's bored? It's not the learner. The learner's engaged in the content. If the content is boring, you're not doing a good job of presenting the content. I would contest that it's the IDs who are bored, and they're looking for some way to fancy up their presentations by putting a bunch of clickable objects on the screen, which do not improve the training. If you have boring lesson to begin with, and you make the navigation more complicated, that doesn't become more engaging, it just becomes confusing. Have I stepped on any toes? Have I turned any sacred cows into hamburgers?
Well, I've always looked at tabbed interactions as a way of giving the learner control over what they're learning. And so adult learners like to be able to to jump around. And if you build a pretty linear course and put them on rails, the engagement in the attention span, especially in this day and age, seems to go down. By giving them some control by using tabbed interactions or sending them off in different branches, it's not necessarily just about engaging, but it's giving them control over what they want to learn and when they want to learn it. And so I've also used tabbed interactions for the nice to know information. Okay, here's all the need to know, but here's some additional information. If you want to look at it, click the tabs. If you don't, just click next.
Right. Nice to know is it almost implies that when you see it to begin with. If you're clicking next to get through and all of a sudden you see the tab set, it implies that this is additional, this is nice to know stuff. And as long as that is made clear going into it, it makes perfect sense. That gives the learner that control you're talking about. And of course, that's basic adult learning theory, that grown-ups like to control what they are learning and how they are learning it. The purpose of this workshop is to look at either side of these type of issues. So I certainly encourage any sort of conversation. Any further discussion with this? Okay, tonight we are looking at some templates. I have the links there in the screen, the chat area for you. You should be able to bring down first one here, the game show. If you will click that link, you should be seeing something like this. This is a template from Sarah Hodge, who is an employee of Articulate. To download it, there's a little button right here, so click download. And then once it gets downloaded to your digital device, click the preview to take a look at it. And you should be seeing something like this, a game show. So let's step through it real quick to see how it works. Let's go. If you're familiar, as many people are, with the Jeopardy TV game show, this should look fairly familiar to you. You have a number of categories here, and in each category you have questions of escalating value. Let's just click one arbitrarily and see. This is the placeholders here are multiple choice questions. They don't necessarily have to be multiple choice. This could be any kind of question if you are repurposing this. And let's first get this incorrect. We see this turns orange to let you know this is incorrect, and it deducts 500 points. Now, that might be good game theory for a TV game show, but I wouldn't recommend it for training. I don't think it's good instructional design to penalize learners from doing what they are supposed to be doing. Just click another one here and we'll do correct. Now it turns green. You get 750 points. Go back to the list of questions here and you see your score, your accumulated score is here. Any questions about how this works? Pretty straightforward. The reason I'm showing this is I think it's a way to do kind of a after the fact opportunity to test out. You can set this up so you get credit for, the learner gets credit for the quiz if they reach a certain number of points. Say, for instance, 2,000 points. So a learner who thinks that they know the material well can answer this with 2 questions, 2,000-point questions, they're out of it. Where learners who are not as familiar with the information may want to go with the lower value questions, and they would spend more time in the quiz, and arguably they would have more reinforcement of their new knowledge. So let's take a look under the hood here. Let me fill the screen with this. And let's first go up to over here in the left panel under scenes, number 7, go down to scene number 7, total score. And you'll see up in the ribbon at the top where it says design, click that, click quiz settings, and you can see this takes advantage of all of this quiz functionality that's built into Storyline. It shows you all of the questions with a little check mark here. If for any reason you didn't want to include a question, you could just deselect it with a question with a check mark. And down here, you can set the score that the learner has to achieve. Let's cancel out of that and go over to the left panel again. Scene number 1, Jeopardy inspired. Go back to the board. It's all driven by this screen full of questions. Let's click one and show that these are pretty straightforward buttons with different states, except that this third state here, disabled, is put in there so the learner has only one opportunity to answer each question. Taking a look at the question slides themselves, we'll just arbitrarily go to scene 2 and see that the buttons now have states that go orange for the incorrect and green for the correct. If you go to the base layer here, you'll see that this, the little circle up there, changes color because of the layer. There's a layer for incorrect and there is a layer for correct. We get to those through the triggers over here. You'll see that I like the way this is done. Double clicking the trigger, and you will see that this incorrect layer is brought up if either of these rectangles are chosen, rectangle 3 or rectangle 5. So you really get a twofer here with this trigger. Either button brings up the appropriate layer, the correct or in this case the incorrect. The correct is pretty straightforward. The trigger is just a very simple trigger here that shows if you click that rectangle there, that rectangle there, you get a correct layer. And then, cancel that. And then the trigger adds 250 to the score. What is the score? The score is a variable. Here, clicking over here to bring up the variables, we see there is in fact a variable called score, and that is a number that can be added to as we go along. And then if we go back over to the scene number 1, you see that this says score. The name of that variable is there. It is bracketed by the percent symbols, which show the value of that variable. Any questions about how this is working? Okay, let's move along to the next, the light box. You follow that link, you should come to this screen. Again, this is from Sarah Hodge, a employee at Articulate. Click the little blue button here to download it to your digital device. And let's take a click preview to see how it works. Now, this is a light box. A light box is very useful for information that you want available to the user throughout the presentation, not just the final slide or from a specific slide. So the slides, the information on the slides don't really make any difference in this demonstration. The action is all up here in the player. So you click contact and you see this gives the user information that could be of use throughout the presentation. Maybe this is reference information where you would want the user to be able to contact a human being during while they were using this product, or else enter a content about the presentation, or that this could be useful for product information, product training for a customer. If a customer is trying to learn how to use your new computer system or your new electronic, something fairly complicated, you may want to give them the ability to contact you. So let's take a look under the hood. Let's imagine do a click along here, fill the screen with this one. Now imagine that this is for an aerospace company and this is for a new hire. Now a new hire might want a map to find the job site. Or the job site, they might want a building diagram to find their way around the job site. They might want to see the a project flow for what they're going to be working on. So let's go ahead and make those changes here. We'll go into, let's change the buttons here to a map, and let's put our building diagram here, building, diagram, and then make this the process flow. And let's change them down here. Change the chat to map, M-A-P. Change the email to building diagram, building, diagram, and we'll change the call to process flow. Okay, now down here on the lower right on the slide layers, we'll select the base layer again, and let's select all three of these buttons. We'll hold down the shift while we click one button, two button, three button, and just move all of them down to the bottom here so they're a little bit easier to see. Okay, now we need to populate the layers. We'll go into start with the map. Since this is Storyline 360, I have access to all of the imagery that Articulate provides. We'll go to an illustration of a map. Press return, see a whole bunch of maps here. And there's a nice looking map. Move it a little bit so we can see the buttons below. Unfortunately, we all know where Ukraine is, right in that area. Let's go over to the building diagram. We have selected the building diagram layer. Go up to Insert. Let's look for a photo this time. And look for building diagram. That looks like a pretty good diagram. We'll move that off the buttons. And finally, we will go to Process Flow, insert a illustration. Find something that looks kind of like a process flow. That looks like a nice process flow. Use this one so we can see the spread it out a little bit so we can still see the buttons. Now, how do we get this up into the player? Glad you asked. Let's go over here and click on the home button. Over here under player, click that, and we'll see that what we have in here is contact. That is what that was added by going to this scene here. Well, let me delete this and show you how it's done. Okay, we have no reference up here. Down here, you click Add. Let's call that reference information. And then the action is we want to lightbox the slide. What slide do we want to lightbox? We click next slide and we'll see contact down here. Contact was the slide that we entered. Click OK. Click OK down here in the lower right, and let's see what we have. We hit preview. And we have our reference information up here in the top. If we click that, when we click map, you can see the map anytime you want it. You can see the building diagram anytime the user wants it, or you can see the process flow. And this remains up here regardless of how many slides that you're going through. Any questions about how this works, why it works? Okay, with that, I will turn this over to Joe. Stop my screen sharing. Samuel has joined us. Hello, Sam. Samuel is president of the Fort Worth ATD, and he was a guest presenter at an earlier. So we're very honored to have you with us, and now prepared to suggest how this type of workshop can be improved in the last 5 minutes, and then I'll turn it over to Joe. Joe, it is all yours.
All right, thank you, John. So I was asked to come in and just kind of do a little presentation and a little bit of a look behind one of the courses that we built. And so I'd like to share, I'm going to put a link in the screen to the course itself that you can see on Articulate Review if you want to go check it out. This is our, here, let me share my screen. Okay, everything's checked. This is our ethics course. I work for Washington State government, and in government, as you may or may not know, ethics is kind of king, and we have certain rules around ethics that we have to follow. And so we recently updated our course. This version launched in February of February of last year. The previous course was a pretty linear course, which reviewed all the laws and all the policies around ethics, and we really wanted to steer away to something different. And so we took and decided we wanted to go a scenario-based training for this. Rather than read law or read policy to the learner or have them read law or read policy, we wanted to just present them with ethical dilemmas and have them make choices, and then teach them based on their choices, or teach them based on the dilemma that we presented in front of them. We worked with the Washington State Ethics Board to develop this course, and we didn't have to make up any scenarios. We used real life situations. They had scenarios up the yin yang over there on different ethical violations, and so we were able to pull from them and utilize their pool of knowledge as we went through. There are 9. We broke it down into 9 different categories or violations, types of violations, and we also focused on the more common violations. Though there were a total of 18 scenarios in this course, and rather than spend 5 scenarios talking about something that maybe only occurs once every couple of years, we spent 5 scenarios talking about the ones that happen most often, and then those that only happen once a year or once every other year, we only devoted 1 scenario to. And so we made sure that we hit the ones that were more common and focused on that. And so I'm just going to take you through some of the slides. And John, I can't see the chat or anything. And so if things pop up, please let me know. I know a couple of you said you are newbies to Articulate, and please feel free, if I go down the technical jargon rabbit hole, to stop me and ask me to explain something. And I'll try and explain as I go. So this slide that you see here, because we are a state agency, we are required to make sure that our courses are Section 508 and WCAG 2.0 accessible. For those of you who don't know, that's to make sure that our courses are accessible to people with disabilities, mainly around deaf, motor skills, and blind learners. And so this is a slide that we put at the front of every single course. This gives that learner with a disability some clues on how we expect them to navigate through the course. Because if they don't have a mouse to interact with, or if they don't have a keyboard to interact with, then they're going to navigate through the course a little bit differently than a sighted abled user. And so we wanted to make sure that they understood these are the kind of the rules or the things that you need to take into consideration if you're using a screen reader or if you can't use a mouse. And so we put that out there right away. This goes at the beginning of every single course that we put out. This was real critical in earlier versions of Storyline, because the way a screen reader behaved with a course built in Storyline was different than the way it behaved with a website, and so we had to make sure that learners knew how to navigate. Articulate's done a lot over the last couple of years to up their accessibility, and now when learners interact with our courses, it behaves similar to how they would interact with a website. We still keep this up here as a good grounding spot for the courses. The other thing I want to point to you to is this little box down in the bottom. This is what's called a hotspot. A hotspot is basically a button that you can hide that's invisible in Storyline. But if you know it's there, or you can click on it and you can designate things to happen. You might use a hotspot if you're asking somebody to click on a specific spot on a map, or something like that. For this case, I use the hotspot as a way to hide something. And this course, when it's for its full length, is a 1 hour course, 150 slides long, and it's a pretty linear course in that it's locked down in the menus. So the only way for me to get to slide 49 is to go through slide 1 through 48. But I often get calls from learners saying, "Hey, can you help me on slide 47?" And I didn't have a quick way to get there. And so I built what I call the hidden menu. And the hidden menu, let me bring it up. The hidden menu is basically a place for me to be able to jump anywhere in the course. And so by clicking on that hidden spot, it will take me here to this hidden menu. And from here, I can jump to any spot in the course quickly. It helps me access different aspects of the course. It also helps me troubleshoot a lot quicker than having to sit through 30 minutes of the course to be able to get to help them. And so this is a trick that I've implemented in my courses since then. This was one of the first ones I did this, but it's definitely something that I add in there. And something you may want to consider is if you have a linear course and you want to be able to jump around, adding some quick way to unlock or access all the slides will be helpful. But I did make it so that the learner couldn't accidentally click on this. Rather than a single click, I made it a double click. So they have to double click on that spot. And then because I'm really paranoid that somebody might accidentally double click on that, when they double click on that spot, another spot shows up, and this time it's a visible spot, and they have to double click on that one. And only then do they get to the hidden menu slide. So I really wanted to make sure somebody couldn't accidentally stumble upon it. But like I said, it's a way for me to quickly jump around the course when I've locked down the menu. Okay. So John mentioned earlier about slide design, and I'll tell you, I use templates, not necessarily as a rapid development tool or as a way to constrict what I'm building, but as a inspiration source. When I'm beginning a course and I'm trying to figure out the look and feel of the course, I'll go to look at templates on Articulate site, on eLearning Brothers website, and even PowerPoint templates, just to look at the look and feel. Am I still online? Hello?
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay. All right. My computer said you might be offline. I'm going, oh no, I've been talking to myself for a while.
I was muted, but I can hear you fine, Joe. You're doing well.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. So I'll go and look at those PowerPoint templates and those other templates, not as a, hey, this is the way I'm going to build it, but it's just a design flow. And when I'm looking for a different feel. And so the layout of this course was really built around a PowerPoint template that I saw and liked, and I decided to kind of implement and blend into it. And so that's how I use templates when building. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that is it there? No. Is I at the beginning of when I start building a course, I think somebody else mentioned this early in one of the earlier presentations, is building a style guide, identifying what colors you're going to be using throughout the course, as well as what the headers are going to look like, what the body. Having this type of a style guide helps you maintain consistency throughout the course. Recent additions to Articulate has made it easier to set font style guides so that you can have different heading texts or different levels of heading as well as normal text and just quickly access them that way. I also use it for common buttons that I'll pull, or when I want buttons to look a certain way, I'll set a style for this is what a button's going to look like. And it's the style guide. All right. So this course is built into, I told you we wanted scenarios built around this course. We want this to be very scenario driven. And we didn't want the scenarios just to be, okay, here's scenario 1 and here's scenario 2, here's scenario 3. We wanted to tie them all together in some way. And so we built it around cities. We had 3 different cities. Each city has 6 scenarios. And when they click on the city, they'll be taken to the city map. Each of these cities have different states. So when they complete the city, it grays out and goes dark so that they know they've completed everything in that city. When all 3 are gray, through the use of variables, a screen pops up and some audio plays and says, hey, here's the continue button. You've completed all scenarios. You can now go to the final slides of the course. But this, the cities that we used, we contracted with a illustrator through a website called Fiverr. If you haven't checked it out, Fiverr is a great site to find people who just illustrators on the fly. I use it all the time when I want a thing drawn because I'm not an artist. And it is a great resource to find just independent people and pay them some money to do this. These 3 maps cost us $200, but these 3 maps were built very custom oriented. They represent different parts of our state, as well as we wanted certain things to appear on the map, so that the scenarios were tied to the city itself. And so like this scenario down here involves Amanda, who owns a restaurant. And so we have her restaurant on this map. This scenario over here involves Jose, who goes to a boutique to buy his wife a gift. And so we have the boutique on the map. So we gave specific instructions to the illustrator saying, we want these things on the map. Here's kind of what we want it to look like. Go forth and do magic. And so that was the rationale behind having these custom maps. Plus, just trying to find some maps that are all in the same style that'll fit your needs was really tough. And so the custom map really became a critical aspect for this. This city map is kind of where all the magic happens. It is. I was telling John today. I look at it a year after I've developed it, and some of the things I built, I'm going, oh my God, what was I thinking? But it really is a machine to help help the learner jump off into the course itself. I told you there's 6 different scenarios. And you see them marked on the screen. One of the things we wanted to do is make sure that the learner understood where they were in the course and how much they had completed. And so we added up here just a progress tracker. You completed 1 of 6, 0 of 6 scenarios. And each time they click on a scenario, it toggles it as complete and then adds 1 to that value. And so it starts counting until they get to 6. When they get to 6, it starts flagging things saying, hey, the course is complete. When it's complete, you'll notice I have a state here that changes the color of the box to green. Green is kind of this all-encompassing, hey, good job color, as well as this map will change to being grayed out, saying, hey, you've completed this map. Again, some visual cues going on, telling them that this is where they're done. But we wanted to make sure that they understood kind of how much they had left.
But Joe, could you please show us the trigger that turns the state gray?
Okay, so it's all tied up at the. So here we have when they click on the scenario. So this is one scenario here. It advances the count by 1 and marks the Molly scenario as complete. And then it advances it by 1 if the Molly scenario is incomplete. Then after it's advanced it by 1, it sets it to complete and jumps to the scenario slide. For the picture itself, change at the beginning of the timeline. It says when the timeline starts, when they get to each time they visit this slide, it checks. Is the count at 6? If the count is at 6, change the map to the complete state. If the count is at 6, change this to green. Change it to the complete state. And so it checks every time the learner stops at this slide. And the way we built this is the learner clicks on the scenario button, it takes them to the scenario, they go through the scenario, and then they come back to this slide. They don't go anywhere else. They come directly back to this slide. It does its math, checking for completions. And if it's not, it keeps going. Did that explain it?
Yes, thank you. It looks as if you have a lot of moving parts here. Do you diagram out this in any way before you think through, or do you create it on the fly?
We rely on storyboards heavily, and my coworker and I. So I'm on a team of 2, and I have the curriculum developer, and she writes the majority of the content. And then she hands it off to me to make it look pretty, is what I tell people. But we are more interwoven than that. When we came up with this idea, this was a very collaborative effort. But yeah, with our storyboard, we really mapped out. You notice, or in the course itself, I have it broken down by the topics. and in each topic are the different scenarios. But we really had to map this out in the storyboard, saying, okay, Harbor City is going to have these 6 scenarios, and it's going to cover these things. And so, yeah, it took a lot of pre-planning to get to this stage before I ever built. I built a proof of concept saying, hey, this is what it would look like. But beyond that, we did a lot of prep to make sure we knew what was going on in each one. All right. So with this, the other thing I wanted to point out is that we wanted to make sure that the learner kind of knew what to expect when they came in. And so the very first city that they go to, they can pick these cities to write, but you get some rebels who want to go, I'm going to start at the last one. We don't care what order they complete it. We just want to make sure they complete all of them. But we also wanted to make sure that there was certain information that they saw no matter which one they did. And so we have, I built a couple of triggers in here. I built a couple of things. We have some basic introduction narration. And when that narration completes, if they haven't been to a map before, if this is their first map, then it checks. That's what the city instructions trigger is for. And if it's false and they haven't been to a map, it's going to show this layer. And this layer, let me show you what this does. So I'm going to use the
course accessibility. This course includes a
jump to the hidden menu.
Welcome to Harbor City. There are 6 scenarios, represented by pins in the map, that you must review to complete this city. When you click on a pin, you'll review the presented scenario. You'll then have the opportunity to review 2 different opinions regarding the scenario. Next, you'll be provided with resources and given the opportunity to do your own research. Lastly, you'll decide if the scenario was a violation of the Ethics Act. To review these instructions again, click the info button on the screen.
So basically, we wanted to give them a layout of what they needed to expect going into this, but we didn't want them to see this every time. We didn't want them to see it every time they landed on this slide, or even every time they went to a different city. And so I set up the triggers that said, when this audio completes, bounce over, show them this instruction slide, and set the city instructions to true, meaning they've seen it. And so now, no matter what city they go to, they won't see this slide ever again. But if they still want the access to the instructions of what we expect for them, we put a little info button up here in the corner, and they can click on that, and this information pops up saying, hey, this is what you're going to be doing, or this is what we expect of you. Again, trying to hold the learner's hand without blatantly holding their hand, just giving them the options to go through that. One of the things that I wanted to show is, so Articulate has a zoom feature that I never ever use until I built this course, because it was always hard to control and always tough to manage. But when we sent this out to the course, to the learner would, or when we first sent this out to our reviewers, our SMEs and content stakeholders, they'd click on this pin and it would take them straight to the scenario. And somebody said, hey, is there a way to really connect the city to the scenario? Because once they got here, they didn't have this image here or anything. Is there a way to really keep the scenario in the mind of the learner? And
Joe,
Joe,
you have about 5 minutes to wrap up.
Okay, thanks. This came pretty late in the development process, and I took it as a challenge. And so what we did was, here, it's probably best to just show it, and then I can show the the mechanics behind it. So they see okay, let's go to Molly. That's all they get in the indication of what kind of scenario it is, just a name. When they click on it, I use the zoom feature to zoom in and then zoom back out.
Molly is getting
And
ready
they
to go
land
on a
at
2-week vacation to
at
Hawaii.
the beginning scenario page. This little change was enough to tie that map back to the scenario and kind of keep it in the learner's mind, and really got a lot of pops from our SMEs and stakeholders. And so the way I did that, when they clicked on this, instead of jumping straight to the slide, they jumped to what I called the transition slide. And the transition slide, the only thing on the transition slide is a zoom feature where you can go in and insert and there's the zoom feature. There it is, zoom region. And you can tell it to zoom in on a spot anywhere on the slide. It zooms in on where the scenario is taking place. Then when it gets to the scenario, it starts zoomed in on this little square and zooms out to include the whole slide again. And so the learner, unless they're really paying attention, they might see a jump cut, but otherwise the learner doesn't really notice a difference. It's just, hey, we zoomed in and now we zoomed out and we're on a different slide. But it really helped us connect that scenario to others, or to the others. I'll talk real quick about my vanity project in this. Maybe you've played those adventure games or those games where you click on random objects on the screen. They have nothing to do with the game, but they might animate, they might play a sound. I hate to say the word bored, but I was bored one day and decided to build that into the course. And so in this map, there are hidden spots on the screen, again, using those hotspots that I mentioned earlier, where if they click on it, it plays a sound. If they click on all four, they earn a badge, this hidden badge system. And the badge will appear up here in the top right corner. It will also appear on the top corner of the screen, of the map. It was my way of entertaining myself and giving some of those mouse click happy people a chance to find those Easter eggs, as they're called, and earn this little badge of. I've only heard from a couple of people that have actually discovered it, but yeah. All right, I think that's about the end of my time. I'm going to leave the link active to the course for about the next couple of weeks. So if you want to go take a look at the course, you can. And if you go in there and you go, hey, Joe, what'd you do? Or how did you make that happen? Or that's really cool. Can we talk more about that? Feel free to reach out to me. Leave me a message in the articulate review, or reach out to me via LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to talk shop with you and just talk about the mechanics of this course.
Okay, Joe, that info button would be a good thing to put up in the player itself, the way that we were demonstrating with the contact information. That would, right. What you did is perfectly adequate, but that takes up a little bit of screen real estate.
Yeah, definitely. It was something that was, if it had been more applicable to all the slides, then I might have considered. Like I said, I look back on it now and go, even though it's been just a year, I go, oh, I'd change this, I'd change that. And yeah, definitely adding it either to the player button. There's another button that we added in there that appears on a number of different slides, which would also have been something, putting it as a lightbox on the player menu, player wrapper. The downside about that, real quick, is accessibility wise. If you put something on the player wrapper, a visually impaired learner has to tab through everything on the player to get to that button. And so there is that balance as well. It's also why I put the next and previous buttons, instead of using the player buttons I build my own, is to make it before all that player garbage comes into play and make it easier for visually impaired learners to access.
Yeah, big deal there. That certainly restricts what you're able to do in terms of the player. Any other suggestions?
No suggestion, just a quick question. As I mentioned at the beginning, I have no experience with Articulate. Is there a place or a recommendation that you would have as far as where I can go to start learning how to use Articulate?
Oh, sure. Go to eLearning Heroes on the Articulate website. There's just a ton of, one of the things I really like about this product, I used Captivate previously. They have just tremendous e-learning support. And you're looking at two of them here with Joe and Samuel. They have e-learning challenges every week, so you can submit your work for others to see, share work there, and they have a ton of tutorials. So go to the Articulate website and then go to the eLearning Heroes area, and you can find a ton of information there. They're good about that.
Really, once you get Articulate and once you get a general feel, if you're familiar with PowerPoint, you know some of the basics behind it. Start playing, start doing the e-learning challenges. That's the way to really get into the deep dive of it. And the e-learning challenges is a great way to kind of test things out, get people's feedback right away, and just yeah.
Anyway, thank you all for participating this evening. Joe, thank you very much for being our guest presenter. That was fabulous. Once this has been recorded, I'll edit it a little bit to get out some of the ahs and ums. And Samuel, thank you very much for joining us. And I would appreciate any suggestions you have on how we can improve this, and I look forward to seeing more of your presentations. So good night and happy e-learning.
Yeah, thanks for having
Thank you,
me.
everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.